Today, we're going to talk our featured presentation about coping with emotional emergencies. And this is a dialectical behavioral therapy strategy using cold to cope. Just a little teaser here coming up about 5 after the hour. Looking forward to hearing about that. Well, I love this slow but great reveal because there is something really new and exciting on the slide. I know you're used to seeing this every week, but look at what we've got now. Between YouTube and Zoom, our special youth edition, the work that SAMHSA has done around youth crisis, is over 1,000 people have listened to it. That's really exciting. Just goes a little bit above the 988 Go Live, but just wanted to let you know that the kinds of people who are listening in are not just today, but asynchronously for many, many weeks afterwards. So really appreciate that. If you watch one, if you're present for a live one that you really love, make sure you point people to our YouTube channel.
Out of your mind.
All right, next slide. Okay, I know some of you have been in this situation where you're like, something's missing. It's Wednesday. What's supposed to be happening? That's right, 988. So if it's fallen off your calendar, no problem. Go to our website and re-download the Crisis Jam event file. Remember, when you visit the website, again, you can see all the good things that we've been doing recently. If you've missed something, you were on vacation, you were out sick, someone told you, ooh, you need that. Or if you're like me, sometimes you want to watch it again, just go to our website, no problem. Everything is there. Last week's was an amazing Crisis Jam. If you missed it, I highly recommend it. Let's talk about what's been in the news lately. Lots of good things. This article in the Seattle Times just a couple days ago, I had a chance to read it. It's about how to fix our mental health workforce and utilizing and leveraging the power of peers. What I love about this article is it's meaty. It's got information about pay, it's got information about boundary setting, where we should use them, and the unique addition of having peers as part of our team and throughout the continuum of care. Great article. Just easily Google Seattle Times peers. It comes right up. Ted, I see you're on today. Would you mind saying a few words about this work that you've been doing at NRI?
Sure. We work with the steering committee of state mental health leaders each year to look at what are the key topics they want to know what other states are doing. And this last year, the crisis service continuum was really prioritized. So I want to thank the states. We work with them to collect a series of information on questions that were developed by this work group. And the first set of reports were published on our website last week, and they cover state support of mobile crisis teams, workforce shortages and crisis services across the continuum, and highlights some state innovative approaches to address workforce, how states are financing their crisis system, how states are using technology, and some outcomes around crisis services. We've got 3 more reports that'll be going back to states for your review, hopefully next week, looking at summarizing the entire crisis continuum across states, as well as ones looking at state support for crisis call centers, both 988 and other call centers, and state use of crisis receiving stabilization programs, the less than 24-hour programs. And for both of those, they sort of look at how many of the programs are in states, are they available statewide 24/7, issues around rural availability, how many people they were serving, financing, workforce issues for them, and a little bit of some outcomes if the states are getting them. So we encourage people to look at them, use them. They're available on our website. I'll put in the chat the link for where you can go and download them, and we hope that helpful.
Ted, as usual, thorough work by NRI and an important work that we all should be catching up on. Now, Dan Gillison, as you know, is the CEO at NAMI, and he was recently at a meeting, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and he demonstrated that he asked on his phone, Siri, I'm feeling depressed. And here's the response. I'm sorry to hear that. Talking to someone might help. If you'd like, I can help you call a friend or family member, or you can find help online at NAMI.org. And I love this quote. I love the fact that in so many different ways, we can find support in that moment of crisis. So really appreciate Dan demonstrating that to us. Feel free to go on mute and try it yourself. All right. Well, here is what I've kind of been teasing for quite a while. So I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Whiteside. She's the CEO of NowMattersNow.org. As I mentioned, please visit their website. Really, really gives you an insight into their thinking. And I'll turn it over to you, Ursula.
Yeah, hi. I used the skill that I'm going to teach at the end of this 15 minutes last night. Marsha Linehan, who's my mentor, who developed dialectical behavior therapy, which includes a whole set of strategies for managing crises, getting through them without making them worse. She would say, when I have middle of the night thinking, I use cold water. And what she meant by that is if she woke up in the middle of the night and her mind was running, then she would go to the sink and splash cold water on her face, and that would help her fall asleep. So we'll talk more about that next. For me, just a little bit about me, I run a nonprofit called NowMattersNow.org, and a number of the resources that I talk about today are listed there. Today, I want you to have a brief overview of these following things: a stress model, which is essentially short for Marsha Linehan's biopsychosocial theory of emotion dysregulation, but we call it stress model for short for communication purposes. I'll share a little bit of lived expertise, recommendations, and a stop, drop, and roll. So the stress model here, simply, you see two people. You see Miss Gray and Mr. Green. And Miss Gray is somebody whose emotions on a day-to-day basis are higher than Mr. Green's. What you see is that she's operating warmer or hotter emotionally. Her stress level day to day due to biology, history, chemistry, all of current life circumstances is hotter. But from the outside, no one can tell that she's running hotter than Mr. Green or than other people in her community. And when someone runs hotter, then when something stressful happens, their response is often stronger, quicker, it lasts longer, and it takes longer to come down. This is important because, I'll let you click through this, David. When people reach this hottest point, let's say they're a 90 or 100 out of 100 in terms of their overall level of stress, what happens is their difficulty in thinking becomes very apparent for many people. So when you get up to that hot level, you'll have a full body physiological response. People are more likely to make mental errors, cognitive errors, thinking errors. Sometimes it feels so emotionally painful. It's emotional emergency is what I'm talking about, that people have overwhelming urges to escape. And what this can lead to attempts for relief. And sometimes for some people, that would mean a suicide attempt. So all of this is to say that many people who have this experience don't understand that the pain that they're in makes sense, especially given where they're coming from, given that they run hotter than other people, given what's been going on in their life and given where they came from, and that's okay. There are tools to help manage this experience, like cold, which is what is, from my perspective, the most useful strategy when your stress level is at a 90, 95, or 100. I wish they were doing it in emergency rooms. It works faster than medication. And next slide. So I want to share with you a few tips. I do a lot of training, and I have a team of people with lived experience you can learn more about at NowMattersNow.org. And they say, yep, all this training is good, Ursula, but it's like coming back at the end of the day when I'm in crisis, how someone can be helpful to me is if they don't panic, they stay present, and they offer some kind of hope. Like that, those basic things are what is most important. You add in all this other stuff, and sometimes you lose, the forest for the trees, whatever the saying is. Being present means really listening. Not panicking means not having one foot out the door, or really focused on protecting liability and stuff like that. But really being present will help often people's emotions come down. And then the last one, offer hope, is really not in a, it's not maybe how you would think. So offering hope can be something as little as, I really look forward to seeing you next week. Or, I see that you know how to get through hard things. That is apparent from what we've talked about. Or I have a couple things that other people have found helpful on this Now Matters Now website that maybe you'll take a look at and see if that is useful for you. It may be. So it's not in a Pollyannish way, but it is like, seeing them or seeing something that they might find helpful. Okay, so let's talk more about the stress model and how to apply. Go ahead again. DBT skills here. So my team of lived experience consulted with other experts in lived experience across the country, along with clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, emotion regulation researchers, crisis workers, peer support, across the board. And we said, given what we know, there are a number of people who, they make decisions in this really high stress situation that they would never otherwise make. And how do we plan for that? So we developed a stop, drop, and roll. We're going to go through it quickly, and then we're going to do the cold skill. So this crowdsource set of instructions for what to do if you have an overwhelming urge to kill yourself. And I would also add, if you're having a general emotional emergency where your stress level is a 90, 85 or above, or you're having intense cravings when you're trying to no longer use a substance, this is what applies. But you see here, so the first step is to shut that physiology down, to shut down what people, what's happening in their body, that fight or flight response that's happening for a lot of people. And so the simplest thing, for some people, they've actually calmed down when they're suicidal. And for them, maybe sleep is what's appropriate. For people who are really upset, you could take a cold shower or use ice water on your face. And this is like a reset button. So there is something called the mammalian dive reflex. If you've ever jumped off a dock into a cold lake, you know what that feels like. It's this response. And it affects your physiology. It helps, I would say, regulate your vagus nerve, which communicates to your brain and helps settle things down. It's the sort of non-scientific way of saying it. So this is me dunking my face in cold water, 2 slides of that. And then we'll move to the second step in stop, drop, and roll. The idea is that, we need something that works in emergencies in the same way that stop, drop, and roll does for fires. So we'll go to the third slide after that. And this is no important decision. So explicitly, we think people should be trained in crisis situations to not make any important decisions, especially deciding to die or to resume using substances. Ignore thoughts that you don't care whether you live or die. Stop drugs or alcohol. These are all lived experience informed recommendations. And then the last one is about helping, next slide, drag somebody out of this sort of myopic state that they're in, where the brain becomes so focused on relief, escape, that it's almost like it can't hold anything else in mind. And so the last step was, how do we pull someone out of that experience and redirect them to something else? And so this one currently is making eye contact. If you ever think about when you were in college and you were started to fall asleep in class, the teacher made eye contact with you, you were awake immediately. It is one of the strongest sort of stimuli that we know. So this is about like finding another person to help get you out of your head, to ask them to help distract you and bring you out. Other people have recommended like pressure to help with this. This is ever evolving, these steps. And I will share an example of, you can find this on the free training and resources tab of NowMattersNow.org. Okay, let's go through these next 2 slides. There's free training and resources, like I said, at NowMattersNow.org. And these include video, safety planning, crisis lines numbers as well. All right, so now we move to the fun part. If you haven't already, what we're doing is a live demonstration. If you haven't already heard, what I have here and is a bucket. Let's see, we can unshare the slides and then we'll focus just on this. And some ice and some water. So I'm going to mix these two things together. Great. And let's see. Just trying to see if I can see myself. So I can see what I'm, yes. Okay. So I've got probably about 12 pieces of ice here. And David, do you mind spotlighting me and then I can make sure you can see what I'm doing?
You're spotlighting. Ursula.
Oh, okay, great. All right, thank you. Okay, so what I've got here is this big bowl of cold water. The longer you leave the ice in, the more difficult it is to keep your face in it because it's colder. And what we're going to do is hold our breath and bend at the waist and put our face in the cold water, not once, but twice for 30 seconds. And we'll have a 30-second break in between. And Mike Hogan, looks like you're going to do this with us. Okay, and if you instead you want to use a gel pack or some frozen peas, the point is that you want the cold temperature to touch this area of your face, your temples, your under eyes. And it's important to try this sitting down if you're somebody who is more prone to dizziness, and to check with your doctor if you have serious health conditions first. The lower you go below 50 degrees, the harder it's going to be, the colder it's going to be. So keep that in mind. It can cause, it can be a little bit painful on your face. All right, so I've got a timer set, and if you've got a Fitbit or some kind of Apple Watch, make note of what your heart rate is now. I can tell you right now, mine's going to be really high. And because we're going to watch that as we do this. Wow. Yeah, right now mine is 124. It's like I'm actually exercising. And I've set a timer here for 30 seconds. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do this together. All the folks that are doing this, if you're using your gel pack, you're placing it here. Okay, so everybody ready who's going to do this? David, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Vincent, are you ready? All right. On the count of 3, you're bending at the waist, holding your breath and submerging your face. 1, 2, 3. It's 30 seconds. All right, first time is a charm. So, how was that? David, you look alive.
I'm awake.
Holy crap, that was really, 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 really cold.
And 30 seconds feels like a long time sometimes. All right, and we've got Vincent doing this with us as well. Vincent, we're going to do this another time. I usually recommend at minimum that you do it 3 times with 30 seconds. My heart rate is still high. This is usually what's true for me. It's high the first time, the second time, and by the 3rd time, it comes down. Monica says, it's so long. And Lisa says, never thought 30 seconds was that long. It is true. Paul, it felt like a minute. Exactly. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to do it again together, team. All right, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. So now we know what it's like to do this live with everybody at the same time. I brought a colleague of mine, Vincent, and I'll let him introduce himself in a moment here. But I'm gonna actually just ask for feedback from David Covington and Vincent about what this experience was like, and Amy as well. If you were measuring your heart rate, you could check and see if it's changed for you. Mine's only gone down about 15. So, but if I keep doing this, like I said, mine was around 126, it will get down to the 60s. I think, David, you had very cold water. To help you? Very cold water, and you might have had more of an impact. I should have left my ice in my water for longer. Okay, so Vincent, welcome. Do you might say a sentence about yourself and tell me a little bit about what your experience was like?
Yeah, hey everybody, my name is Vincent Chargaloff. I'm a Suquamish tribal member from Suquamish, Washington, right inside of the Seattle area, but I currently work for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde as one of the grant coordinators. So this particular DBT skill does have some traditional values back where I'm from. We use water to pray. We're located right on the Puget Sound, so we use water to pray for things. So one of the things that has been carried on from traditional times to contemporary times is using cold water to help pray. So whenever I'm preparing for ceremony or any work that needs to be done in the community, I always take 3 days before to pray, to fast, to go and bathe in the rivers. So when I discovered this as a DBT skill, when I was meeting with a therapist, I was like, you know, this actually is kind of cool because it has some traditional values in it as well. So I didn't realize that it was a DBT skill, but now that I've recognized it and associated it with who I am as a traditional person in my community and who I am working contemporarily in this community, it lines up between the two. So I like to take the skills that I have in my toolkit and try to explain it to the youth that I work with that, hey, if you're feeling escalated, if you're at your boiling point, then you can do things like take a walk or submerge yourself, in cold water. Another thing that that cold water has been used throughout my life is one of my old mentors, Jossie Ross. He used to take me to go work out because I wasn't in a good place when I was in high school, and there's a mentorship program at the school that I went to. And so he would tell me, after you work out, after you do any sort of sweating, after you do any sort of exertion, you should take a cold shower. One, to help close your pores afterwards when you work out so you don't get sick, and then a few other things, like it's good for the soul. He was a huge advocate of your mind may be sharp, but you need to find ways to temper it too. So he introduced this skill to me before I knew what DBT was, in order to help temper my mind so that I'm able to have a little bit more willpower when I'm making big decisions.
I think Marsha Linehan said, like, she stole everything in her DBT skills. So she took the great things and integrated them in here. One of the things that we know about this is that it slows our heart rate down. Part of that may be due to the holding our breath, but part of that also is, the cold temperature itself. David, what was it like for you?
Oh, wow. So first of all, Vincent, thanks so much for sharing all that. That was terrific. But the first time, Ursula, and look, I can hold my breath for quite a long time, or I thought I could until we were together in the first one. So the first one I was really focused on, can I last? The second time, once I calmed down a little bit, and the sensation, again, I had the ice in here, it hurts, Ursula, and it really is a distraction. But I tell you, and seeing Mike Hogan, Mike, it just reminds me, it's only been 20 years that, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm educated with the background that we all had. And in 95, there's still really no one talking about lived experience and bringing the skill sets that Ursula, you and so many others. I see Kathy, who's going to speak with us later, Lisa, and just the rich voice that has so moved us over the course of this past 20 years to help us to think about these issues far differently. And Ursula, the other thing I think about is that one of the first voices who came out was William Styron with his book, A Darkness Visible, a famous American novelist who writes about his own suicidal depression. And one of the things he says in it is, I don't know how to explain to you what this emotional pain is like, but he said the only analog is physical pain. And over time, as I've referenced that in front of groups, Ursula, people continuously come up and say, if I had a choice with physical pain, I'd take it. So it's interesting that this distraction has some of that element in a controlled. And then one final thing, when we're talking about ice water, the Rabbi Kushner book, Why Bad Things Happen, or When Bad Things Happen to Good People, he talks about the ice water with your feet. And how much longer you can do it. I think he said twice as long if there's a caring individual in the room. And here with the crisis jam, all of us doing this together, Ursula, you leading us makes all the difference. So one of the most empathic, caring, innovative clinicians with their own lived experience out there is Dr. Ursula Whiteside. So thankful to have you.
Oh, thank you. And for folks that are trying to find this, if you have Linehan's skills manual, it's on page 329. Thanks, everyone. Love to hear what your experience was like in the chat. It doesn't have to hurt.
So just really appreciated this, Ursula, today. Appreciated also David giving us a little look behind the scenes, how he runs these meetings, and see him doing the water. So many of you participated. I have to say, I again, similar to David, the first time I was kind of, I think, breathing faster. I was really like, oh my gosh, am I going to make it? I'm going to make it. And then after we took that break, I could feel myself like consciously bringing my breath slower and slower. And then it really, the second time, had a different kind of impact, I think. So really appreciated that, and can vouch for the cold packs working. And thanks for the tips to do it in across my eyes. So some messages in the chat, Ursula, feel free to respond to those. We will move on now to just a reminder. I did have a chance to talk about this a little bit before we started today, but please visit the SAMHSA website. So many great assets there for 988. Also, I will just point to you on the 988 subgroup of the SAMHSA website. They have lots of great little tidbits for you to post on LinkedIn. Little, little reminders about privacy or things like that, which I've really liked and brought into LinkedIn, just to kind of spread the news about how 988 works. So please do that. And remember, Spanish options are available. Please order them for your community. Also, as I said before we started, you may not have been on, remember, we've got our t-shirts. Please remember, you have the choice of any of the 5 quotes. We've also got long sleeve shirts for those of you making it through the winter. We've got modeling there by David Covington of his Crisis Has No Schedule. Good choice for today. And we've also got hats. So please order, as I mentioned at the top, good Valentine's Day gift for some of your friends. All right, let's move on now. This was something that SAMHSA and David Covington brought to my attention, an important meeting that happened this week with the Department of Justice and the Council for State Governments, along with SAMHSA, to really talk about the law enforcement perspective on 988, an important perspective that has to be considered as we move forward, and really brings us to what we're going to talk about on our hot seat. So wondering if Brandon Wilcox is here. We could bring Brandon forward.
I'm here, y'all.
Oh, wonderful. And I love the y'all. You must be from the South. Where are you
I am
from?
not. I'm from Colorado.
Oh, Colorado. Well, that's good. So thanks for being part of the hot seat today. Wanted to bring this forward. So let me read you the question. I'm going to give you a couple choices, Brandon. We're not going to see real change in this country until blank is funded, trained, staffed, and supervised like other first responders. This is a quote that was said at this meeting this week by Senior Lieutenant Alan Herring from the Newcastle County, Delaware Police Department. Now, I'm going to give you just a little tip, which is, remember, this is from his perspective. Law enforcement. What would he say has to be funded, trained, staffed, and supervised? Okay. So This 988 forecaster event focused on the voice and perspective of law enforcement. What did Lieutenant Herring call out as the most transformative? Was it A, 988 crisis contact centers like call, text, and chat? Was it B, community-based mobile crisis? C, crisis receiving stabilization centers? Or D, the full continuum of core crisis care, all three? Now, Brandon, we're going to give you the voice of the audience. Everybody's going to vote right now on their choice. I'm going to put my vote in. Now, I'm going to share with you what the audience says. You also have the ability to phone a friend, somebody on the call who you might want to talk to, or you may just have a really good gut sense of what you think. So let's see what the audience had to say. Oh, a pretty split group, but two stand out. B, community-based mobile crisis had 36% of our audience, and full continuum of core crisis care, all three, was 43% of the audience, but still people had A and C. Do you have any gut feelings?
My gut feeling was going with B, and considering that's 36, I'm still going to stay with my gut. I'm going to go with
I
B.
love it. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. We're finally at the part in our career where we do listen to our gut. It takes a while, but we finally got there. Happy for you,
Absolutely.
Brandon. Okay, so let's see what the answer was. Let's reveal. Look at that. Your gut was right.
Woohoo!
Mobile-based, community-based mobile crisis. So this is where he felt the rubber hits the road. 911 culture is to dispatch, fire, police, or EMS. Without scaled mobile crisis, law enforcement is often faced with the prospect of hours in a hospital ER for someone who really needed care, not police. So I think this was part of the message yesterday during this meeting, and we thank SAMHSA for bringing together those experts in that meeting this week. Of course, they felt all three were vital. For those of you 43% who chose D, but he did in this particular quote really emphasize the importance of community-based mobile crisis. All right, well, Brandon, you'll be getting your t-shirt. So, and I think actually they're generous these days. You can pick long sleeve or short sleeve. So thank you so much for coming forward and being part of the hot seat today.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. So next on our list is our lived lens. And remember that we see this part as really the part where we pause and think about the end point. Where are we wanting to land with this effort that we're all taking part in called 988? How will we know when we've got care that feels like care? And we're so excited that Kathy Basher is joining us today. Of course, she is quite a champion of peers and really has worked, at the top level of behavioral health administration, worked with NAMI, and really has both lived experience and professional experience that she can bring forward to help us think about that endpoint. So welcome, Kathy.
So thank you. And by the way, I'm traumatized. That's not my picture. That's one of my best friends. Anyway, thank you for the attempt. I spent 7 years of my life in mental institutions, including the Arizona State Hospital. Those years were very, very traumatic. I had ECT, insulin shock. And so I kind of dedicated my life to make system changes. And I was invited to attend the 988 by Access state meetings. And I really viewed it with a jaundiced eye. I think the concepts are very good, but I go to what we can do to prevent people from needing crisis, not at that point of when they're receiving services. So if you look at the rural areas, we lack the resources. We don't have places to refer people. The providers are just not there. So there's a serious crisis with that. So one of the things that I've done is go into Access and say we have to renovate Olmsted. And as you guys know, Olmsted is putting people in the least restrictive environment. So I've utilized that to get Access to put into a new version of Olmsted to do oversight with peer and family members at every level of the system. And hopefully, sit on the plans, sit on Access, because really a lot of access oversight, we've got a lot of complaints about. And so this will be putting peers and family members in a very good position, and except for they're going to need training. Another stumbling block is the legislative appropriation of $24 to $48 million for secure housing. That was appropriated last year, but they haven't used any money. Not only that, there's no evidence base that proves this work. We're sitting on all this money. We know housing is preventative, and the money is not being used to put our people into housing. And so why aren't we now putting that money back into the housing fund instead of sitting for secure housing that's going to, the first couple of years, help maybe 15 people? And it gets me real excited. I need some ice bath right now. So if you really look at how $48 million could impact the lives and act as a preventive to so many people. The other thing, the last piece that I just like to share is that working with the police is very, very important. I work with CIT in the rural areas. They don't hold out hope for us. All they see is us coming back for crisis calls. And so that's a negative thing that we really need to get over with. And so I'm doing a lot of work, and the advocates up in Northern Arizona are rattling the cages. We don't get what Maricopa County gets, and we're demanding for our rightful share. So anyway, thank you everyone that's done so much work for 988, but it isn't the total answer.
Kathy, you're so right. And if I could just take a moment just to say that I'm pulling in your energy. And I don't know if you've seen in previous weeks, we've had a segment on this called Tough Talk. We don't have it today, but you gave it to us, and I appreciate that. And we do have to get mad sometimes and really demand and question how things are used and being distributed and where the evidence is behind it. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that you highlighted rural areas. It's one of the things that sometimes gets glossed over, either because people don't pay attention to that, or they know it's going to be hard. And so it's avoided. But you're right that there's so much to be done in that area. And a lot of people have done good work in there, but we need more. So I really appreciate, Kathy, you bringing us down to reality and telling us what all we need. And I appreciate your tough talk. So thank you. And I don't know, is that the right picture for you?
That's my beautiful picture.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad we fixed that in time. All right. Thank you so much, Kathy, for joining us today. All right. Oh, you popped back to be your friend. All right. We wanted to bring Christy Malik forward. So happy to see her today. Someone that I've had the opportunity to work with on so many occasions, and feel both that she's a friend and a colleague. Christy, welcome, and talk to us a little bit about your interview with Megan Stone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. And my colleague Nili Ezekiel and I had the pleasure of interviewing Megan Stone. So Megan, I just want to see if you're able to join us. Yeah, great, thanks. Megan is the manager of clinical best practices and care transitions at 988 Lifeline. So we interviewed her to learn more about Lifeline's follow-up program. And during the interview, one quote that just really resonated with me when she was describing follow-up care is that she, to kind of paraphrase, she said, "It's the right thing to do because a crisis doesn't disappear the next day." And I think that really just, underscores the vitalness to follow-up care. So another interesting point that Megan discussed was the positive bidirectional benefits of follow-up care for both the crisis counselor and the person in crisis. Megan, can you share with us some of those bidirectional benefits?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. I have been with Vibrant for a few years now and worked for 12 years at my local crisis center prior to coming to Vibrant. In my last 4 years, I worked in doing follow-up contacts. And so this is an area that I'm very passionate about. And while we know that just from the research, we've demonstrated the effectiveness of follow-up contacts for individuals in crisis, And many crisis counselors would also share anecdotal stories of individuals sharing with them that follow-up helped them to connect to needed resources, get additional referrals, supported them in staying safe after that initial call, and just made them feel cared for. There are benefits to providing follow-up for crisis counselors as well. We know that handling inbound crisis contacts it's not a low stress job, and providing opportunities for crisis counselors to do some outbound follow-up work can add some variation and kind of a breather from answering those inbound contacts. One of the things that's so difficult about crisis work is that you rarely know how things turn out for the individuals that you talk to. So we sit with them in some of their most difficult moments and then pick up the phone or answer that chat or text to do it again with another individual. While sometimes people do call back or tell you at the end of the interaction that the conversation was helpful or that they're feeling better, more often than not, crisis counselors never know what happened next for that person. So follow-up can give crisis counselors an opportunity to check in with the person after that initial contact with the 988 Lifeline, to continue to support them in making their safety plan, troubleshooting any barriers or adding additional things to their safety plan, working with them to take next steps in resolving any ongoing challenges that they're having, and having an opportunity to hear how any resources provided on that initial call worked out, or give them some more if they didn't. So it's an opportunity to continue that contact and help them with maintaining safety and getting connected with what they need. While crisis counselors know that the work they do is valuable, and their focus is on that process of helping the person in crisis, hearing some outcomes while maintaining that rapport for even a brief follow-up period can really help them see the value in their work more clearly and provide an opportunity to help in a different way than receiving those inbound contacts.
Great. Thanks, Megan. It was such a pleasure interviewing you, and thank you again for just your passion in the crisis service field. So Amy, back to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, both of you. All right. So we have the pleasure of having Kirsten Baronio today to talk to us about Medicaid.
So Amy, this is Tom Betlock. I'm going to hand it over to Kristen in just a minute, but first a quick shout out to Kathy Basher, and great to see her. She mentored me for so many years, and I always got to see that passion in terms of the issues that were before Medicaid in Arizona. Second is David and others. We got to work, I think, on rebranding, because nobody should put Medicaid in a corner. So I'm thinking Medicaid front and center rather than Medicaid corner. And third, Amy, as you mentioned, yes, we have the pleasure of having Kristen Baronio on today. And there was a lot of discussion about some significant legislation that was enacted, during the holidays. And there's actually some sections in there on crisis. And Kristen, in her role in CMCS, tell us more about that.
Great, thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. Nice to join the Crisis Jam again in my new role here at CMCS. I'm a senior policy advisor in the Center for Medicaid and CHIP Services, the Office of the Center Director. And yes, we were very excited to see in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023 that passed or was enacted right before the holidays at the end of the year, a provision that directs CMS and SAMHSA to work together on developing some guidance specifically around how Medicaid and CHIP can support the crisis continuum. The legislation is quite detailed and in all the different topics that we're meant to address in implementing it. And primarily the provision around guidance sort of refers to a whole host of issues and topics that are, I know you all talk about a lot on this call, just around, what are best practices around 988 call centers and mobile crisis and crisis receiving centers, and how Medicaid and CHIP can support some of those activities with administrative funding, including enhanced match for some state technology investments, as well as, coverage for regular services, strategies, best practices around, urban and rural areas, how to provide services for children and youth, minorities, individuals with disabilities. Peer supports are mentioned. It's a long list of different kinds of activities that this guidance that we are directed to jointly develop is meant to address. And then interestingly, we're also directed to establish a technical assistance center to help states, state Medicaid and CHIP programs design, implement, or enhance the continuum of crisis services for children, youth, and adults. And also refers to leveraging other federal funding streams in addition to CHIP and Medicaid, and developing a compendium of best practices that's supposed to be public facing and updated annually. We did get a little bit of funding for that. I think not quite enough, but we'll take it. And the deadline for establishing, for doing all of that work is July of 2025. So, we're starting to get ourselves organized internally and organizing, collaborating with SAMHSA to think about how we're going to partner on this new effort.
We've seen similar technical assistance centers work well, I think, in the Medicaid space before, Kirsten, in terms of areas like the duals and others. So really excited in terms of that resource being made available to states. Hopefully it can come up and in place before that July of 2025. I know that seems like it's out there. It'll be here before we know it. But are there any particular models that come to your mind in terms of how to think about the TA center and what that can look like? And we certainly appreciate you being in your new role back at CMCS.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, we actually have another activity going on right now that was, that's not quite up and running yet, but something we're going to lean on because they're kind of more out, further along in development, is a technical assistance center we were directed to develop to help states with school-based services. And we are in that provision directed to collaborate with Department of Ed. So very similar in that regard. But I think, I think we have a lot of experience at Medicaid in providing technical assistance. It's a lot of what we do here at CMCS. So I think, it's just a matter of sort of figuring out the best models there and open to suggestions if folks have, ideas about, kind of best practices there or existing approaches that we can look to. That would be really helpful, actually.
Well, thanks so much for being here today. We look forward to ongoing updates as this rolls out, and it'll be a tremendous resource for states, Medicaid programs, and their journey in terms of developing their crisis system. So thanks so much.
And Medicaid is now front and center and not in a corner.
I saw that. Thanks so much.
All right. Let's turn it over to SAMHSA and John Palmieri.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks, Kirsten. Really excited about the language in the omnibus and the work that we can collaborate on supporting financing of crisis services. As you point out, I know this has been a need in the field and a request for ongoing support and assistance in strengthening the sustainability of crisis care and financing in particular. So this is great. Also just wanted to provide a shout out to Kathy and her comments, really timely, as we have also been very engaged with the Department of Justice in a couple of different areas. One, as has already been flagged, was a convening that happened with law enforcement partners yesterday, getting them at the table, both in terms of promoting awareness of 988 and getting their engagement around opportunities to provide health first responses to crisis situations, which is critically important moving forward. And then also working with our justice colleagues around that Olmstead frame to support crisis system development in states and localities. And so there'll be more to come on that, including how we're leveraging the expertise of peer support workers in that space as well. Just also wanted to flag quickly that we did provide 23 awards to tribal nations and tribal organizations as part of our 988 implementation grant series, and are looking for additional opportunities for specifically supporting tribal nations, citizens and organizations in FY23. So there'll be more to come on that. And then before passing it off to Richard, just wanted to, of course, highlight that we recently crossed over the 6-month anniversary of 988 implementation. While I know we all recognize the immense work ahead of us, we did use this occasion to look back on where we were at the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration, where we were even as recently in July, and where we are now. And we are making a lot of progress. And so feeling very good about that and optimistic about where we're heading. And I'll hand it off to Richard for additional comments.
Thank you, John. So I'll just mention a couple of things. First off, I want to say it's wonderful to be engaged in today's crisis jam with Ursula Whiteside, who we've worked with for goodness how many years, but your work has so enriched the suicide and improved the suicide prevention field. So thank you for everything that you've done. I'm also glad for Vibrant and for the Crisis Jam highlighting the issue of follow-up services. And as you know, as many of you know, that initiative started when the initial Lifeline evaluations that SAMHSA funded showed that while suicidal ideation was able to be reduced on the call, 42% of those who had been suicidal experienced a recurrence of suicidal ideation in the next 6 weeks, but only 20% of those were linked to any kind of care. And Dr. Gould's continuing evaluation work showed how greatly valued follow-up contacts were. And now SAMHSA has embedded follow-up as a core principle in 988 implementation. There's also language on follow-up that is in the omnibus. And it's great to have Kirsten Baronio here as well, because I don't know if there's anyone who's any smarter about how we can try to maximize the potential for sustainable reimbursement for these kinds of life-saving services. For example, there was a major NIMH study in the state of California focused not on callers, but on people in emergency rooms, showing that those with suicidal ideation seen in emergency rooms had a 24 times greater risk of death by suicide in the next year that had been a suicide attempt, 56 times greater, yet rates of follow-up were poor. So the idea that the crisis does not end when the first contact ends, even if it's in an emergency or even an inpatient psychiatric stay, is so critical. And it maximizes the importance of our paying attention to these kinds of follow-up services. So thank you very much. And thank you, John, and to the Crisis Jam team.
And as always, thank you, SAMHSA, for your leadership and support as we are on this journey together. Turning it over to Nashville and Arlene Stevenson.
Hi, Amy. Thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm here today to tell you about a new resource. I've mentioned it before, but we hadn't told you about the detail of it. It's a chart, basically, that provides a state-by-state analysis of legislation that provides funding for 988 suicide and crisis lifelines. This chart is, like I said, it's in a chart form, and it provides a description of all 2022 state legislation. So it's only 2022. And this is legislation that has an appropriation or budget related to funding for the lifelines throughout the country. So I just want to make sure that you understand that it's not all bills, it's only 2022, and it's only those that are financing related. Also, if you want to forget everything I just said there, you can find that information. It's bolded on the first page, and it's also in the key on the first page. The chart provides basically a brief explanation of the purpose for and the amount of the appropriation or budget, and provides a link to them so you can see the detail. It also indicates if this is specific to children's services, which is something that we're looking for. It indicates if there is a fee, and it also indicates if there is a study, usually a comprehensive study that's being required by the legislation. The key has some color-coded symbols, so it'll tell you if the bill is enacted, pending, or failed. And we hope that it will serve as an inspiration as states move forward in building their 988 Lifeline networks. There is a version of this on our website that should not be there right now because it hasn't been updated. And it will be updated soon. So please watch for it later today or tomorrow. But as far as I know, it has not been posted yet. And also, I just want to remind you, we're talking about legislation, that the 988 model bill template for 2023, which is an update to last year's model bill, is also available and is on the website right now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Arlene. Let's take it over to the federal update with Sarah Corcoran.
Thanks, Amy. So I'll go over quickly what made it into the end of year omnibus in terms of appropriation. I'm sorry, in terms of authorizations. Joanna from AFSP covered appropriations a couple weeks back. So very quickly, we had official authorization for the newer mobile crisis pilot program, as well as the Behavioral Health Crisis Coordinating Office. There was also Medicare coverage for mobile crisis services through the physician fee schedule. That's an important step towards building out more Medicare coverage of the crisis continuum. And then, of course, what Kirsten mentioned earlier, state guidance from CMS on Medicaid and CHIP crisis services, as well as that publication of best practices. I will quickly turn to Joanna for a House update, and we'll see if we can move through to the state stuff next.
Yeah, we can go very quickly. Just one update. Wanted to flag for everyone that the Congressional Mental Health Caucus has a new co-chair. Previously, it was Representative Katko. He has since left Congress. So now we have Representative Chris Stewart stepping up and taking over the co-chair on the Republican side with Grace Napolitano, who is the Democratic co-chair. So just wanted to flag for everyone. We're excited to see what work they get done. He's always been a champion for 988, so we're looking forward to working with him.
Sounds like it's good news for us. Onwards to state updates. Jordan no, we're going to start with Stephanie.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, so we are now in late January, which essentially means state sessions are in full swing. And we are seeing a lot of new 988 legislation at the state level, including in Oregon. Just wanted to flag for folks. Oregon has already passed some 988 related legislation, but they have a robust package in House Bill 2757. This is right now just in committee. Quickly, what it does, it establishes the 988 Trust Fund. It does set up a 988 telecommunications fee at a level of 50 cents exactly. Has that advisory committee, which includes a requirement for people with lived experience to be a part of that. A couple other states I'll hit real quick before turning things over to Jordan. There's also a new bill in New Hampshire, Senate Bill 85, that actually has a hearing, had a hearing this morning. That really defines what behavioral health crisis services in the state look like. This is sort of a study bill where they are going to establish a commission that's going to look at the long-term funding for behavioral health crisis programs and make recommendations to the legislature. It also has a small insurance component where it really limits how often prior authorization can be used for emergency behavioral health services. And finally, I'll just wrap up with mentioning Wyoming's new bill again, House Bill 65. This sets up a trust fund, advisory body, call center requirements. I will say on this particular bill, amendments are flying at the moment. So we will see where that text lands in the next few weeks. But with that, I will call up Jordan Pantalone with Vibrant to round us out.
Thank you very much, Steph. And just very quickly, because I know we're short on time. So yesterday we had a hearing on Maryland Senate Bill 3. And as a reminder, that one would appropriate $12 million to the state's 988 trust fund. Indiana, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago. Senate Bill 1 that appropriates $15 million for crisis response has a hearing tomorrow. And also just starting to track some proposed budgets in Minnesota. We have the governor's proposed budget there, which includes a 12-cent 988 fee. So if we do end up getting an official bill there, we'll keep you posted. Back to you, Amy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on and land this plane. Let's see what else we've got. So lots coming up. Next week, we have Megan Jones-Bell, who's at Google. And I'm sure we're all going to be interested to be reminded what a good work and the strategy and vision they have for consumer mental health at Google. And then we have Eric Raflayan, who's going to be talking about, we've been here before. He's going to be talking about ambulance care in the 50s and 60s. We're going to hear from him. I'm looking forward to that. Wanted to thank our incredible speakers who really pushed us today. Dr. Ursula Whiteside, Vincent Chargoloff, David Covington for his input, Brandon Wilcox for his hot seat winner, Kathy Bashor for her tough talk, reminding us of the importance of rural and really questioning where our money's going. Megan Stone for the importance of follow-up contacts for 988 callers, and Kirsten Barono for our Medicaid update, no longer the corner, but front and center. We appreciate every single one of you and can't wait to see you again next week. Thank you all for being with us today, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank you.